Welcome to the Ukrainian National Museum. This is the first time that we are presenting the exhibit collaborating with a new museum in Ukraine, in Kyiv, Museum of Maidan. We call this Museum of Hero of Heavenly 100. And also supported by the Consul General of Ukraine in Chicago. And this is very important that so far we have a first time such a nice collaboration with a Consul General of Ukraine, because they also worry about the Ukrainian culture, and they would like to share the information and the truth about Ukraine by the exhibition like that one. And in August, we will celebrate the 26th anniversary of Ukrainian independence. It's happened 26 years ago without any blood, but so far we are paying too much because we have a war in the eastern part of Ukraine, and we paid 8,000 lives for that independence for the last 4 years. And just to thinking about the 26 years, it's a short period in the history of Ukraine and the history of the world. During the whole history of Ukrainians, they are fighting for the independence. And 100 years ago was the first revolution, and through those time, for the 100 years, always was some protest, some movement for the independence and the way for democracy. By this exhibit, we are showing how all those periods of Ukrainian revolution connected. We always fighting for the peace and to be free nation in the world.
The exhibition, The Courageous Our Heroes, features the most important periods of Ukrainians' struggle for independence and human rights since the last 100 years. Mostly focused in the Ukrainian Revolution of 1917-1921, then the Second World War struggle, and in the struggle and protests for Ukraine's independence and freedom in our modern history, the Maidans starting in the 1990s and Maidan in 2013-2014. This is a very simple exhibition, but which brought into light quite difficult questions of Ukrainian history, and not only history but of the present, because in fact we have a big challenge how to present the history in our contemporary exhibitions, how to turn subjects of history into objects at the museum exhibits, how to interpret Ukrainian history, because the rest of the world know about the Russian Revolution, speaking about 1917. But in fact, it was a fantastic time for Ukraine also, a chance to re-establish the statehood, which was lost in the beginning of the 18th century. And it was a great chance to tell the story of conditionally 6 generations of people who in fact were volunteers, having no statehood, how these people were brave enough to take arms and to defend their families, their land, their values, and their human rights. And so we tell the story of so-called Holodny Yar. Holodny Yar was a phenomenon. It's a name of a location in the center of Ukraine, and the people who were against, people united against the Bolsheviks, against the communists, and almost over 24 villages were united and controlled by a self-reliance group of people, local people, who decided to be independent and to be free. Also, we display a story of Ukrainian Sychovy Streltsy. It's a rifleman military unit which was formed during Austrian-Hungarian Empire. In fact, they were called a regiment of intelligentsia. So they were defending the Ukrainian identity, most of all cultural, within the military unit of other empire. It was also a phenomenon. We have a great story of UPA, Ukrainian Insurgency Army, which was organized and fought against both Nazi and Bolsheviks, trying to defend Ukraine. And this is also phenomenal because they existed, or they fought for Ukraine's independence for almost 11 years. It was fantastic struggle against communist regime in that period. And also we make a bridge between that movement for independence and struggle for independence with our newest modern history, speaking about displaying our at least 3 Maidans, so-called Revolution on Granite, which lasted only 15 days. A small group of students believed that they can change the country. And they united and they started to protest in the downtown of Kyiv, demanding that local transition government, because it was before Ukraine was declared independence in 1990, and they wanted re-election of the parliament and some political demands for Ukraine's independence development. And another very important moment in our history is Orange Revolution. It was also against the falsification of people's political will. Speaking about the struggle for freedom and rights, we usually imagine the guns. But in fact, the role of art, and especially on Maidan, was crucial. It was stronger than arms. How people, especially artist community, tried to shape identity of Maidan, and we can see phenomenal artistic expressions which tried not only to unite Ukrainian community around the events, but also to transform the message about what's going on outside. And here you can see one of the best examples and one of phenomenal things on Maidan, the painted helmets. First, they appeared to self-identify different units, public organizations units on Maidan. And later on, it became an artistic phenomenon. A lot of people painted their helmets. You can see different types of them. In the very first phases, people painted some religious motives, like icons of Our Lady or Jesus Christ, because Ukrainians are mostly Christian, and trying to protect themselves from the opposite side, which was with guns. And this was also how people believed in the role of art and the connection to their many centuries tradition, culture. The Orange Revolution took place in November 2004, and it was continued, in fact, almost 10 years later, 9 years later, by so-called the Revolution of Dignity, the Maidan, because the Orange Revolution did not succeed in guaranteeing the stable democratic development of Ukrainian society, and Maidan was a great manifestation of people's choice for the Western democratic values and the democratic vector of development. And Maidan is also phenomenal because it was all the 94 days of revolution, different phases. From the first, like it started as a pro-Euro integration movement. Mostly students started protesting against the refusal of the government signing of the European Union Association Agreement, and this was unpredictable for the Ukrainian society, because for many years Ukraine was going into and following a lot of the documents and the regulations in the law, and it was so unexpectedly that the corrupted government led by Viktor Yanukovych, the president, for one day decided that they do not want to support the people's will. And so the protest started. Young people, students come, and in the night on November the 30th, they were brutally beaten by riot police. It was not only for some political demands for Euro integration, but much wider, against violence, for human rights, for freedom.
For the Maidan, I actually came to Ukraine for a conference about regarding Ukrainian genocide, which took place on the 9th of October. And everyone that was attending, we were discussing the genocide against Ukrainians, wherever they happened, Soviet Union, Ukraine, etc. And in the back of the mind of the people was the signing of the accession agreement. And one day at the end of the conference, it was announced that, that President Yanukovych did not sign the accession agreement. 3 days later, I was supposed to meet a friend of mine. She's a director of Fulbright program in Ukraine. And we were supposed to meet by the main marketplace called Bessarabka, which is a corner of Khreshchatyk and Shevchenko Boulevard, two huge main streets in Kyiv. And our time to meet was at 12:30. So I get down at about 12:15. I walk out of the building and I look up, and I have never seen such a flood and sea of people as I saw right there. A march of protest against not signing the accession. We met at 12:30, then we started walking up, towards where the main event was supposed to hold place, which is on the European Square. It's a large square. Traffic was, of course, stopped. Everything was stopped, so it was a large square. We walked up to that, and then we went up into the hotel, and we went upstairs, and we were watching all the proceedings and speeches, and it was, like I said, not only a sea of humanity, but also a sea of European flags and Ukrainian flags, because this was a moment of protest against the fact that their own president blocked their road to entry into Europe. So when this accession was not signed, it was assigned to them that they were steering him back into the old Soviet Union, which is what Russia wanted. And they didn't want that to happen. The Ukrainian state that grew out of the Ukrainian Rus has been a thorn in both Europe's side and also Russia's side, because they always wanted independence. They don't want to conquer other people's land. And that's why maybe you never heard of Ukraine, because if they would have went and conquered a few countries, then we'd be on the front page of the New York Times. But it doesn't happen. The Ukrainians are content with their own country, but they want to have their own country. Unfortunately, as in all cases, when you don't have political preparation, sometimes the greatest amount of effort fails, and the War of Liberation failed. But it set the ground because 30-some nations recognized Ukraine as an independent country. And that's why Maidan, or the War of Liberation, or the Orange Revolution is always at the forefront of the Ukrainian people, because they have a history and a culture of freedom and standing up for their rights.
Exhibition tries to also to discuss the heroes in our history, because this problem is quite relevant to the processes in Ukraine's policy of memory at the moment. And speaking about heroes, here you can see Serhiy Nihayan. He's really a hero, and he's really the courage person. Serhiy Nihayan was shot by riot police in the middle of January, and alongside with another guy from Belarus, Mikhail Zhizhnevsky. And in general, officially, 107 people were killed, civil people were killed on Maidan. But unofficial statistics is maybe twice or even 3 times more. And why this is important, it was kind of a shock for the Ukrainian nation, which was since the Second World War, and it was quite a peaceful nation. And such crimes against society were phenomenal for Ukrainian side. That's why Maidan is so important, and it's so deep in the hearts and soul of Ukrainian nation. And unfortunately, these events are not very well known in Western Europe, in the United States, and connecting Maidan to contemporary events in Ukraine. We have a war in the east, we have annexed Crimea, and this is not the problem and challenge and tragedy of Ukrainian people, but this is a very important and very dangerous sign for the rest of the democratic world, and it shows how the nations should be united in the face of the global threats, how they should understand each other, should cooperate, and learn much more their identity, their history, which will help to face the global challenges together.